Raheem. So announced as official from our guy from ESPN, Andreas Hale. August 22nd here in Las Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. It'll be Rolly Romero defending the WBA welterweight championship against Teofimo Lopez. Now about that WBA championship, Rolly has long joked he has Rolly privileges, and he has been proven to be correct because he's held on to that belt well past a year now without having to make a mandatory title defense. Jack Catterall and before him, Shakram Giasov stand on the sidelines, miffed, annoyed, passed over. And yeah, they have a right to be pissed off because the WBA is making a mockery of its own protocol by allowing Romero to do this, but ultimately it produces a bigger fight. He had a fight fall through with Manny Pacquiao, had a fight fall through with Devin Haney, and now he lands, it would seem, a Teofimo Lopez fight. I do still say it would seem because August 22nd is like 6 or 7 weeks away, and if you go on StubHub.com or Ticketmaster, there's no tickets on sale yet, let alone an undercard, let alone an official announcement from the promoter. But I have heard a press conference is incoming in Los Angeles in the next week or so, so sounds like we'll have that. I want to just really quick get to the technical aspect of the fight and then let you cook. So there's one train of thought in this fight, and I haven't looked up the odds yet, that Teofimo Lopez, being the two-time lineal champion, being the overall quicker, better fighter, you would say, throughout their career, definitely throughout their careers, is the favorite. If you go and look at a sparring session they had from 5 or 6 years ago, Lopez was tagging Rolly Romero. He was hurting him to the body. He was too quick for him, too creative for him. But I would point out to not just leap to that conclusion right away that Lopez will win this fight, because that sparring session came when they were lightweights and now they are welterweights. And I think that jump up to 147 is more beneficial for Rolly Romero, who is the naturally bigger guy, and he is the bigger puncher than Teofimo Lopez. Just more bone density in him, something Jim Lampley kept pointing out in his fight with Ryan Garcia last May. So I think them fighting at 147 as opposed to 135 back in the day, this favors Rolly Romero, the bigger man and the bigger puncher. Also, back then in that sparring session, Teofimo was undefeated. He had all his gusto and confidence and the wind at his back. Ever since then, in losing to Kambosos, in losing in a shutout to Shakur Stevenson, and in having difficult fights with Jermaine Ortiz, Sandor Martin, he's been figured out. A lot of his tricks that he had up his sleeve that were working on Rolly Romero, the scouting report is out on him now. And you have been talking about that at length when we break down fights, that the more people get a look at you, and especially if you don't continue to improve and grow and find new wrinkles to your game, in a sense, the easier you get to be beatable, because guys are now harvesting that data fight to fight and know what works against you, know what plan of attack to take. And Teofimo hasn't really gotten better. All those bag of tricks, like I said, they've been figured out to a degree. Also, Rolly Romero starting late at 16, 17 years old. He's actually more experienced now than he was 6 years ago. And from being stopped a few times by Tank Davis, by Isaac Cruz, he is now a more cautious fighter. And that has made him a little less, that's made him less of a knockout artist now here at a higher level of fighting, at the championship level. But it paid dividends against Ryan Garcia. He was very patient, and he still carries the power that Tank Davis says is the hardest he's ever been hit, to get your respect. And if it's and he won the fight against Ryan Garcia outside of the one catch and shoot left hook with a jab, with a busier jab. And when Rolly throws a lot of more punches, when he ups his volume, he gets very off balance because he throws those sledgehammer bombs off balance. So he's not throwing as many of them. He's more dialed in. He's more of a minimalist. And that minimalism is what actually helps Shakur Stevenson outclass Teofimo Lopez, not getting caught into a lot of exchanges. So it's funny, Rolly has always made fun of Shakur Stevenson. He can't punch his way out of a paper bag. He's boring, blah, blah, blah. He may take a page out of Shakur's book and fight a lot more minimalistic. Now they're at a higher weight where the slower pace could favor him and his punching power. Well, that's all I'm saying to unpack all of why you can't necessarily just go Lopez beats him. Lopez, with his pedigree and his accomplishments and his advantage and quickness, is going to beat Rolly Romero. But neither one of them have a lot of momentum right now. That Ryan Garcia fight was awful when I went back and watched it last night. Teo's coming off the worst fight of his career. Rolly hasn't fought in over a year. So we head into this without either fighter having a whole lot of momentum, and it's 6-7 weeks away.
There hasn't been a time until now when you would put this matchup together and say that anything but Teofimo Lopez winning the fight is a highly, highly likely outcome. Like, the conversation we're about to have now could only be had right now. That's a talent gap. You talk about a late start from Rolly, the sparring session 6 years ago, the accomplishments, everything on paper and everything that you would expect from day one out of both of these fighters because of what we've seen from Teofimo and what we would anticipate having seen from him in the future. Back then, he really was the takeover guy. There was a time when people were like, man, this guy really is not only going to take over, but it's imminent. Like, no one's going to stop him. After beating Lomachenko, you got to remember the role this young fighter was on and how good he looked doing it. I'm not taking any of that away from him, but you do say that neither guy is on a roll. I might take exception with that. I know how long it's been since the Garcia fight, but you have to understand that, to me, and I have no clinical diagnosis, but I think we are dealing with two neurodivergent people. Neither one of these guys is really, really with it like, you would expect a normal person to be. These guys are not, like, normal. I don't know what it is, what you would say that each of them have, but get ready for a super awkward press conference, the likes of which we haven't seen maybe since Victor Ortiz and Floyd Mayweather. And I'm just like, I don't know a more unusual type of perspective than you can get from this combination of fighters. And when I say Ortiz and Mayweather, I'm not even talking about Mayweather, although he was a strange bird as well, especially in that fight. But really, I'm talking about Ortiz, right? I'm trying to think of a time when we had two guys that were like that. I can't think of it. Rolly Romero, because of what I think is some bit of a detachment from a normal processing brain, is on a roll. He sees himself as the guy who beats the guy who thinks he's going to beat everybody. He, in beating Garcia, I got to remind you of what the fight week was like. He was being awkward and weird and understated, and we thought, maybe his head's not in it, or at least I thought that wrongly. And when he won, it was very matter of fact, and he was gracious in victory. He was like, I don't want to stand in the way of the rematch of Garcia and Haney. Like, I just came to do what I did. Like, you guys, you know what I mean? And then when I asked him, he just had all the very, fight on the spectrum answers. And they were brilliant. Like, it was funny to see how that transgressed. I don't need to go through the laundry list of Lopez personalities. We went from a class clown to a racist to a daddy's boy to the different ways this guy is presented along the years will make your head spin. I don't know who he is. I don't know if he knows who he is or who he will be by the time this fight comes along. But in my mind, he at this point knows that he needs to get back, and he's reaching for that moment immediately. Teofimo could take a lesser challenge. Not that he's a big superstar draw and could just fill any spot or have any pay-per-view just because he's in the fight. He's not that guy. But nobody's pressing him either. You know what I mean? It's not like they're screaming for Teo to put himself in deep waters immediately, or if he had a fight to get his bearings back after this loss against Shakur, just a superior fighter in Shakur. You know, not no huge shame in the loss, but maybe you get back on track, give yourself a little tougher task or easier task before you go in with a Rolly. But no, Teo feels like it's time to grab this back, and since the Haney fight eluded Rolly, I think Teo was more than happy to step in and try to grab this moment. It's really Teo doing the chasing. He's going up to the weight division. Was by far the bigger and better prospect and world champion with the better resume and done all the things. And now he needs to beat Rolly more than Rolly needs to beat him, which was the same thing with Garcia after coming off the PED thing and all the madness. He needed to beat Rolly more than Rolly needed to beat him. And Rolly is going to run in there like, hey, this is what I do. I beat these guys who are reaching, who come to me because they need a win. And I snatch that from them. And I do it with a deadpan face and delivery. And afterwards, I'll let them go along their way. Part of what Rolly is about now is not chasing anything in the ring, and how he defines himself personally. I must give credit to Versace, as he calls himself now, because that was actually the best Rolly Romero interview I've ever seen. Like, this guy, when he was talking about his interaction with Clarissa Shields, she says it didn't go that way, but whatever, that was his truth, right? And I was enthralled. I was raptured in this interview. That was the most I'd seen from Rolly give any interviewer in versatility and giving the different dimensions of his personality. I think in his head, man, this is a life journey, and boxing's a piece of that. His whole religious thing, we've seen fighters go through that, but for him, because this is a piece of his overall life journey, and he's not feeling the pressure of being any particular thing that they say he needs to be or accomplishing something on somebody else's timetable, he's going to be the more relaxed, confident, matter of fact, this is what I come to do, I know how to do it kind of fighter. And I think what we're seeing in their careers might play out in the ring, that it's going to be Teo needing to press and level up and prove that he's something that we all expected him to be, and Rolly, again, being the guy who upsets the apple cart and overachieves. Like, everything about Rolly is an overachievement, at this stage. And
when you talk about him being, it is. And when you talk about him being relaxed and not the pressure on him, the persona of being a blue chip prospect and a generational talent, that's not as attached to his identity. He's already playing with house money. For Teofimo Lopez, that's why if he loses, it's more of a career and life crisis, because this is what he's pegged to do, what he has done in being a two-time lineal champion, and that's why he's the guy who's supposed to win. And you're right, that's what Rolly, he's found God, he likes the stock market, and if I lose, I still talk shit, and when I feel like it these days, he doesn't talk shit as much as he used to, but I'm still Rolly. I'll still land fights, because then I just comfortably kind of fall back into my original role, which is as a sellable B-side for the A-sides that are supposed to win. And the question I have is, he's already fulfilled what I called him 5 or 6 years ago. He's going to be the Ricardo Mayorga of this Four Kings era, as they were dubbed, of the Ryan, Tank, Devin, Shakur, Teofimo. He's their Ricardo Mayorga. My question is, Mayorga only was able to upset one of them, Vernon Forrest, in his era. When he fought, he beat Vargas too. He did beat a past his prime Fernando Vargas, but against Trinidad, De La Hoya, Mosley, knockout losses, right? So I wonder, is he already the scalp he was due to collect is this era's Mayorga, has he already collected it in Ryan Garcia? Or does he have another one in him in this fight against Teofimo Lopez? But I think his personality, it's because I take a little umbrage with saying Versace Rick had the best interview, and you're probably right when it comes to showing different layers of his personality. But in the Fight Hype days, the guy who helped land him the Gervonta Davis fight with entertaining shit-talking interview after entertaining shit-talking interview at the now defunct City boxing gym behind the Strip and in the Mayweather boxing gym was your boy right here. And he goaded him. He talked shit over and over again. He would say Tank is 5'2", and I said he's listed at 5'5", Rolly, and Rolly would go, yeah, maybe with fucking high heels on. He would say, I'm actually Devin's biological father. Me and Bill have discussed it. On and on and on and on and on and on and on. And eventually it landed him the fight when he was like 14 or 15-0 with no, he had a WBA trinket to his name. But he landed the fight because he talked his way into it. And, that was... But anyways, that was the old Rolly.
Let's not breeze over that. You did your Cosell thing. I understand and appreciate that. And listen, I'm not going to take anything back from fucking Versace. But I think because it was Ring, and you caught Rolly in a good moment, and he had good questions, and Versace stayed out of the way. He didn't jump in. He let Rolly expand. He did ask good follow-ups. It was more just like... Those are two different genres, right? Like, that was a series of very entertaining and impactful interviews as they did produce something. And this was just like a one-time sit-down where I'm seeing more of the inner monologue in this guy, more dimensions from him than he was prior, at least in my estimation, willing to show. And so I thought we got a more window into like, all right, who is this guy and how does he tick, right? What you got was like, the best of it. You got some great, like, the best Rolly. The Rolly that makes us all laugh and then gets what he wants out of it. You got that in spades. So, yeah, kudos and credit to you. No apologies for the oversight.
But that was his first album, okay? And that Rolly, it's been frustrating to interview him over the last really since the Gervonta fight. It's been a frustrating interview because he doesn't give that anymore, and he probably even knows that's what everybody wants. They're all, because there was a time you could show up to his hands and eat out the palm of his hands. What ridiculous joke and what funny thing is he gonna say next about everyone else's favorite fighters? And he's now withhold that, and he's very coy now, and he keeps that. Not unlike his transformation in the boxing ring, Raheem. Once upon a time, he was a free-flowing, crude slugger, right? And he, in a sense, he got tamed by Gervonta Davis. He got hurt and beat up by Isaac Cruz. So now he doesn't fight like that anymore. He doesn't conduct interviews like that anymore. And maybe for this assignment against Lopez, who struggles more with thinkers and guys that box and look to slow the pace down and things like that, that's what actually benefits him in this fight, because Lopez is a brilliant counterpuncher. And if you don't give him a whole lot to counter, then it makes it tough for him. Rolly's actually a good counterpuncher. And even while we're talking about this perceived talent gap and Lopez's quickness and creativity edge and his upper body reflexes and all that, people used to laugh at me, Raheem, but Rolly is very talented. That is why he's started at 17 years old and beat the shit out of world champions in the gym. That's why he beat up Ryan Garcia in the gym before he beat him last May. That's why he beat up Yordenis Ugas. That's why he beat up much more Richardson Hitchens. He had a good sparring session with guys who had been boxing a lot longer than him, guys who have better classical boxing skill than him. How has he overcome that? He's actually a gifted fighter. He is explosive. He has a pretty decent sense of timing in boxing and exceptional punching power. And strength. He's very strong. So Rolly's always been a talented kid and now a talented man. Yeah, I'm interested about the fight. I do wonder if that Mayorga scalp has already been collected and now his fate is to lose to the other, premier talents of his game, or if he wins this. And then lastly, they were friends once upon a time. In that era of the shit-talking Rolly highlight reel that I compiled on Fight Hype, he was close with Teofimo. They were really good friends. I have a video that did like 1 million views from 2021 where they're moving around in the ring and they're sparring, and you see these two, hulking lightweights that, both of them sturdy, big guys moving around, having fun, joking around, and then they had a falling out. And then after that falling out, they're now cool. They're cool, but they're not boys like they once used to be. So I don't know how that dynamic plays out in the fight. It might be a very slow-paced fight,
Well,
we'll see.
neurodivergent people like speak the same language that none of us understand. Like that doesn't surprise me at all that they were very close. And then the competitiveness of boxing and the positioning yourself and the competition. Now they're about to meet finally in the same weight class. Like with title on the line. Like, yeah, these things can pull people apart, but what I respect is that they are grabbing the moment. Both of them. I like that Teo is taking this fight and could have gone an easier route, and I like that Rolly seems down for whatever. Like, there's a lot of conversation around why the Haney fight didn't happen. If you can make this happen, then why not the Haney fight? Is Haney to blame? I think that's a different fight. That's a unification bout. That is a much bigger fight. There's more money in that fight. You're getting two fighters off of wins. Like, those two things don't line up. You know what I mean? Like, those are not apple to apples comparisons. And this fight probably was easier to make because Lopez wants the fight more than Haney wants it, not for any other reason than because he needs, like I said, to beat Rolly, and Haney doesn't. Haney's got other options and thinks of himself as a more valuable fighter who should be in a richer fight, and I don't take any exception to that. I'm just saying that makes this fight much easier to make right there on its face. And so the layoff from Rolly, I think normally I'm a big ring rust guy. I take that into consideration a lot. But again, I think because this guy is thinking different, is approaching life different, that part of his training and part of his battles, a part of the way I look at fighters in general is there's an internal battle that we all fight, whether you're a combat athlete or not. And Rolly is constantly doing that. I really think I like this guy. And what's funny is he's the only other person who walked out of my interview was him and Mayorga. Now Mayorga.
Oh wow! I remember. You asked, "What do you respect about boxing?" He goes, I remember this, right? This is a Raheem classic from like the Cotto fight, right? From when he was fighting Cotto at the MGM, and Raheem goes, you smoke. You say you don't really train that hard for these fights. You like to smoke cigarettes. You added on a few other things, and you go, "What do you respect about boxing?" And he's like, "What do I respect about?" Fuck you, and left. Basically, right?
I got after him. I listed all of his personal and professional failings, and I conveyed my disgust with him as a person. That's the only interview I've ever done like that. It was wrong. It was wrong, but it felt right. It
was kind of wrong. It was like totally Raheem's picking a fight.
I was picking a fight with a fighter, and I knew I was like, maybe he will get mad enough to swing, or maybe not. I don't care. Let's see what happens. And fortunately for me, he just decided he flipped the table on the way out. Like, you can barely catch that at the end of the frame. He knocked the table over on the way out, and that was my desired effect. Rolly, I don't feel that way about at all. I like this guy when he, even when he walked out of the interview, it was just because it was just awkward, and it was I don't want to answer this question. I was digging at him in the build-up to the Garcia fight about how aloof he is, about whether he's even dialed into this fight or whatever. He's just basically like, fuck you. I don't like this interview anymore. Which was hilarious. Yeah. Fine. That's fine. So I say all that to say I think we may either be in for a classic, and this establishes, as you said, it takes Rolly out of the Mayorga conversation. We're beating one guy. You can call it a fluke. You can say that guy was off on the night. You can excuse it away.
Mayorga did beat Six Heads Lewis too. Now that it was the undisputed welterweight champion.
Or you could be like, this guy, the kind of talent that you have talked about him having, and I say it's overachieving. I'm not, okay, the talent exists, but those wins, those accomplishments, I don't think were expected from him. Right. And if he wins this fight, it won't be what's expected from him by most people, maybe more people than it would have been in the past. But you're right. Lopez is going in as a favorite, even though he's stepping up in weight, even though Rolly's a champion. All those things aren't going to matter because of how we consider Lopez in a talent gap. And it's Rolly who keeps having to prove that he can meet the moment, that he can. You could even call him a gatekeeper for champions. He's not a gatekeeper for up-and-comings who need to establish themselves as, professional contenders. These guys who are considered world-class fighters, who are world champions, who need a good win on their record, come to him to prove that they're still those guys, and Rolly is slapping them down. He's the guy who unceremoniously
Calm down. He slapped one down. He slapped
in
one.
his mind. But that's what I'm saying. When you listen to him talk now about himself, his life, what this all means, who he is, that's what I'm extrapolating from it. That's what I am getting from him. So in his head, this is going to be another day at the office. This is going to be him once again doing what he does, and the only people who are shocked at it are the people who thought he couldn't do it, and he simply is not at all interested in that. It's like, oh, you're shocked again? Okay. This is what I do.
That is a better joke. That is a better troll. His material's actually gotten better. It was one thing to verbally berate them and upend them verbally, but now he has dialed back the verbal attack and said, what if I just fucking beat him? Then what?
The way people love your British accent, this is my favorite. I wasn't ready. I didn't know you were going to do that. Now I'm going to want it all the time. That post-fight Ryan press conference and interviews from Rolly was some of my favorite Rolly stuff. I mean, this guy, man, be careful where you let
they're in the middle of Times Square trying to build up this fucking rematch, and you just nonchalantly, with the Saudi billionaire ringside and everybody and all the bullshit, they spent all this money to build it up, and you just went in there like...
And then he had the nerve to be like, just do it anyway.
Just do it anyway. They can still fight after I beat his ass. Yeah, I think it's...
I'm like, isn't there more money in the rematch? It'll be bigger, and you'll be, I don't want to. I don't want it, and I don't care of it all is hilarious, refreshing, and actually, the deadpan delivery is entertaining. So
he's less slapstick now, and now he's deadpan.
Yeah.
Which is usually a higher form of humor.
Yeah. I before we get out of here, I don't have a prediction. I don't know.
We got 6 weeks to make a prediction.
But I will predict this. It's going to be the most awkward press conference you've ever seen. Get ready for this announcement press conference.
What do you think, before we get off, what do you think of people, social media, saying this isn't a pay-per-view fight, they're not going to sell that well in the T-Mobile Arena? What do you think?
I understand that thinking. Maybe Rolly is a bigger draw than people give him credit for. Maybe the dynamic between the two of them. That's a big wish list, though. They're probably right.
Is he the crowd favorite in this one? He lives out here. People get a kick out of the guy.
I think he's the crowd favorite. I think Rolly's the crowd favorite for sure. People, I'm trying to tell you, man.
What a pro Rolly podcast this has turned out to be.
I'm a fan of this guy. The more I get to know this guy, it doesn't rise the level of me being biased or rooting for him. And I will tell you on the occasions when I am rooting for a guy, I'll tell you that. But it's not that. It's just that I think people are gonna like to come see him. I think they are perceiving about him what I'm perceiving. And while it would still be an upset, I think on the bookies' books and in most people's minds, I think a lot of people will come there to see that upset. People will come there expecting to see that upset. And maybe before we get out, we should talk about the business of it all, right? The
Prime, DAZN, simulcast.
Yeah. How does this fly into the face of what you had hoped promoters would do? And is now the time when we finally say that PBC is bending the knee?
Yeah, it's trying to think of some right, like it's like I can't put it right, but it'd be like if a wife was accepting that you have a Gumar, and that eventually the Gumar being DAZN, and Amazon doesn't look at PBC as a wife, but for lack of a better way of putting it, it's like, let's just PBC's headed to DAZN is the point I'm trying to make. And the reason why I'm not as hyped about other people would be the selling point of PBC, Top Rank, Matchroom, Golden Boy all being under DAZN is finally all promoters under one umbrella, is that DAZN is a big money loser. And now I think the TNT partnership sparks optimism and hope. Like, if a lot of these best fights on DAZN are now going to be broadcast on TNT, that could be big for the sport. That could move the needle a little bit. But it's fake money. It's not a platform that has hosted boxing that's become so visible, so profitable with its product that now all the promoters, it's a guy who's willing to burn through money. It's multiple guys, whether it's the Saudis owning their stake, whether it's Leonard Blavatnik, losing at a loss almost every single year. And so it's not real. And people now, I notice, are weaponizing that to continue to pump up Zuffa. But all Zuffa is doing is losing and burning money too with their first year out, as they continue to say, wait until the end of the year to judge us as each month passed by. I mean, I just checked the Richardson Hitchens Edgar Berlanga. They're posting it on Twitter. The ticket sales are incredibly slow. They haven't had one show that's moved the needle at all. Their social media numbers are worse than DAZN. So, and halfway through, I just point that out because a lot of people, they're being cute. They're now all of a sudden pointing out how lackluster DAZN is on the market and using it to prop up. Well, they're ready to jump to their new hubby. That's why Zuffa needs to take over. And it's like, no. But yeah, it seems that the writing's on the wall that PBC has no choice but to go to DAZN. They didn't have the depth of the roster to fulfill enough dates to put about a consistent product on Amazon Prime. And so Amazon, who has bigger things they're concerned with the NFL and the NBA and other content, is taking a pass on boxing unless some 12th hour, decision comes. And PBC will head to DAZN with all the other promoters, where turning a profit doesn't really matter anymore and hasn't since DAZN's inception. So that's cool, I guess.
Well, the promoters are turning a profit. I think we're at a stage now where finally DAZN will be and is exactly what they say they are. They're the home of boxing.
Right.
And they're, again, I've expressed my displeasure with certain elements of the pricing system, the commercialing inside the 12 rounds of boxing, or 10 as it were, when I'm being charged and then charged again for basically 2 subscriptions, and then on top of that commercialized too during the fight. I've expressed how appalling that is. But with that said, it appears that they have finally gotten to a stage where they can be profitable and be the home of boxing, where all roads lead back to DAZN, and it will be Zuffa who will be the outlier. It'll be, everybody versus us. It will be what the Zuffa stance is, essentially. And I think that has taken as long as it's taken. And don't forget, they started with what was purported to be $1 billion with Matchroom. And see how long it's taken, and all the different things that had to happen, and now the players that you mentioned to get involved to bring DAZN finally to this moment. So if you want to say that that's what Zuffa is combating, and put these two apples to apples type of comparisons, if this is where Zuffa needs to go, ultimately, look how long it took for DAZN to get there, how much money they had to hemorrhage, and then the good fortune they had to fall into to get, Saudi money and to get all of the convergence finally of these promoters and who it had to take to actually make it what they said it would be from the beginning. And I have to remind them that they promised us no pay-per-view, not unlike PBC, who said pay-per-view is dead. Not unlike everybody who comes in the game and promises the world and ends up going back on those promises. And while Zuffa is saying, look at us at the end of the year, I guarantee you at the end of the year, they're going to have to start making some equivocations and rationalizations and give us another 6 months and we're almost there and you just don't know yet. But it really did happen. You just can't see it with your lying eyes. Like, they're going to come with the bullshit because you can't get this done in a year. No matter who you have or what government it is or who's pulling the strings, this is not how boxing works. So, yeah, look at the zone and what it's taken and where they are and maybe finally are in a position to get into the red. You think Zuffa's going to do that in a year? No. And the sanctioning bodies now are lining up on the other side, and I think they see DAZN also as the home of boxing. And their last rescue dinghy off of what could have been the Titanic if they stayed divided. You know, the fact that Teofimo Lopez is getting this fight, well, that's not right. But the sanctioning bodies also see the writing on the wall. They don't want to put mandatories up that aren't going to earn even what Teofimo and Rolly are going to make at the gate. You think this is going to be a tough sell? Imagine a mandatory. How tough a sell that would be. Would that even be considered to be at T-Mobile? And would we be talking about it right now? I don't think so. Right. You know what I mean? Like, maybe in a few weeks when the fight gets closer, we'll be like, yeah, we should probably mention this Rolly fight coming up. But unless...
on this undercard.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The sanctioning bodies, are getting in the fight as well and lining themselves up on the other side and doing what makes fans happy right now and kind of abandoning their so-called standards and practices. We saw how Ryan Garcia got in line for Barrios. Absolutely corrupt. How we see now how quickly and without any real even explanation, they're not even bothering to bullshit us. They're just like, you know what it is. You know what it is. This guy's
fuck up and watch the fight, okay? You want to?
You know what I mean? That's the world we're in. That's and that's what the hill that Zuffa's going to have to climb. And I guarantee you, they're not going to be on the top of it in the next 5 months.
Maybe 5 years, but we, you talked earlier about off the spectrum from T.O. and Rolly. I, too, joined them many a time. And I just wonder if all this we're talking about, this seeming competition and all, if it's all really just being orchestrated by above all of our heads and everybody in the business heads by some big-time string pullers of media and government and all that stuff. I do, That's where my spidey senses usually lie. I don't want to articulate it and keep this going too much longer. To be continued.